Hello and welcome to another video and podcast from fantasyfootballscout.co.uk. My name is David and today we're going to have a quick look at someone who is feeling in a very comfortable position right now. That is of course the world number one in all of FPL. We are currently in an international break and so that usually gives us time to have a bit of a pause, have a look at a few of the things going on in the FPL world, and one of the best places to do that is with the current number one leader of the pack, and we're going to have a look at what their team looks like at the moment, how they've got to that stage, what chips they've used, what chips they've not used, any tips we can glean from their captaincy, and things like that. And the other great thing about doing this, to be honest, is a lot of the time the guys who are world number one at the moment are not that far off having a similar team to yourself. So if you've come into this international break a little bit down in the dumps at how your team got on in Gameweek 12, then perhaps take some inspiration from this video. You will definitely notice that this current world leader is not someone who's trying crazy stuff that's coming off every week. So, take some solace from that this could be you the next time we have an international break, which admittedly is in March, so you've got plenty of time to put the work in and get top of the tree. Now, speaking of putting the work in, of course, in the international break, it's a good time to have a look at the stats and tables and all sorts of amazing good stuff inside the Fantasy Football Scout members area. You can currently save up to 20% on the current packages. There's a few different ones. Go and have a look at the website, pick one that is right for yourself. Among the many benefits is going to be some fully interactive Opta-powered tools and tables, instant match day data, season points projections, team transfer planners, and drafts from the best fantasy managers in the world, including some former winners and the most recent champion. Now, he's someone who knows what it means to be number one in the world and hold onto that spot on the final day of the season. So if you want some tips from him as well, then do check him out. Now, this video is also sponsored by Betway, so we've got a message from them. They are the principal betting partners of West Ham and betting partner of Brighton. On Friday, they announced the heroes of the weekend. Bet £10 on player markets, top scorer of the heroes, and they will credit a free £1 bet for every point up to £20. Betway also run giveaways, including shirts and tickets for West Ham and Brighton. We know that not everyone gambles, which is something we take seriously, which is why on our website we have a filter you can turn on, which allows you to opt out of gambling ads. For those who do enjoy it, do it responsibly and safely. There's more info about Betway in the description. You obviously have to be 18 or over to play, and we encourage everybody to gamble responsibly and to be gambleaware.org. When the fun stops, stop. Now, someone who is having a lot of fun this season, and at the moment it hasn't stopped, is of course the world number one, who is from India. His name is Pradomnia Shirsath. His FPL name is Mr. Frodo, and just because I'm a bit of a geek and I do like my fantasy, I probably am just going to call him Mr. Frodo for the rest of this video, although I will avoid using Samwise Gamgee's Irish accent to do so, because I'll probably offend basically everybody in the chat if I attempt that. But yes, Mr. Frodo, how has he managed to get to number one? Well, his current team at the moment was what took him there, with 91 points in Game Week 12, from a team that, as I said, it's not that dissimilar from the sorts of teams that we have been seeing in a sort of template format across the FPL world. So fear not. There's always a chance you can have a good game week and rise up the ranks. Now, in Game Week 12, Mr. Frodo went from world number 4 to world number 1. He'd actually held his position at world number 4. He got the all-hallowed grey circle in Game Week 11, which we'll come on to in a minute. But for the benefit of the podcast listeners, let's break down his team as it currently stands. And this is what I mean. This team is kind of like a normal team. It doesn't look like some crazy guy's team. It just looks like everybody else's team in many ways. So you've got Onana in goal, which is still a very popular goalkeeper choice. Anderson, Zinchenko and Cash is the back three. Matoma, Bowen, Diaby, Son and Captain Salah at the midfield, with Alvarez and Haaland, the vice-captain, up front. Turner, Zuma, Udogie and Wejo on the bench for him. Clearly, injuries have been plaguing his team of late because he's got Udogie and he's got Wejo on the bench as well. But he hasn't, been too worried about that. Happy just to maximise that starting 11. The only real people that really kind of stand out here is massive differentials. I mean, Zinchenko is one of them because he's not really, you would describe, the Arsenal defender of choice. And that's about it, really. Anderson has actually been in his team since Game Week 1, like myself, actually. So he sort of is a differential and not a differential at the same time. He was a differential at the start of the campaign, less so now. Harder to get hold of because he's more expensive. But you can tell this is a manager who's trying to play the fixtures because he's got Matoma in the team, he's got Diaby in the team, he's got Bowen in the team. It'll be interesting to see what he does with Son. But obviously a lot of the success has come from having Salah and Haaland, which is interesting, of course, because after the last international breaks of 4 game weeks ago, the guy who'd managed to get top of the entire world was someone who didn't have Haaland. Now, the hauls that Haaland has put in over the last few weeks obviously that's changed, and Haaland is very much back, in vogue again, best shown by this particular team. So yes, 91 points in game week 12. But how did Mr. Frodo get to the top of the mountain to drop the ring down the mountain? Again, could have just flown there, but not this guy. Didn't need any of Gandalf's eagles for this one. So he started the season 284k with a solid 84 points in game week 1. Then in game week 2, only got 47 points actually, which is really interesting. Not a great game week. Went down to 900k. And so again, further inspiration for anyone who's having a difficult time. In just 10 game weeks, he's gone from 900k to world number 1. That can happen to anyone at any stage of the season. Fairly confident that around this time last year, Ali was not really in the top realms of the world. So yeah, there's all sorts of ways you can climb up. The biggest rank rise for him was game week 3, 73 points in what was quite a low scoring game week. Took him all the way up to 39k. Then 102 points in game week 4 took him to 1k, 55 in game week 5 to 583rd, 90 points in game week 6 took him to 170th, 77 points after that he went up to 49th, 63 after that took him up to 18th. A bit of a dip in game week 9 when he only got 80 points. Oh no, but I mean I remember that game week. I had a lot of points that week and still went down. 73rd, then 91 points in game week 10 took him 4th. 29 points with a -4, so in reality a 25-point haul, held him steady at 4th in the world, so that all hallowed grey circle in game week 11, and 91 points in game week 1 took him top of the tree. But how did he achieve all of what I've just mentioned there? Obviously some really interesting transfers within that. So this, what we've got on the screen right now is his game week 1 team. So the question is, how did his game week 1 team become his game week 12 team? And so this is his transfer history. So he hasn't actually made all that many transfers. It's just 11 transfers this season. For a bit of context, I've made 13, and I'm not necessarily that much of a transfer trigger happy manager. So for him to have only made that many transfers shows that he's been quite a patient manager. And what I find really interesting about this is when he has rolled his transfers and when he has used them to a good effect. So the first transfer that he made was to sell Reece James in game week 2 and replace him with Colwill. Then in game week 3, he sold Gabriel and got Chilwell. So he actually had Colwill and Chilwell in his team at the same time. But obviously the recurring theme there is that he has used one transfer and then one transfer, right? But then game week 4, there's no transfer. So he rolled his transfer for the first time in game week 4. But did he use both of his transfers in game week 5? I'm quite a big fan of rolling at the first opportunity and then sometimes after that using both of them. And then maybe a third one for a -4 for that mini wildcard. Well, not Mr. Frodo. He had other ideas. In game week 4, he rolled that transfer. He just spent one of them in game week 5. So sold Bowen and got Diaby. And so it was then the following week where he actually used both transfers, and to good effect as well. Stupinian and the Camber weren't doing it for him. Botman and Gordon came in perfectly timed for the Newcastle fixtures at the time. Of course, Botman has now had an injury, but he got him in at the right time. Then Chilwell left the team to be replaced by Cash in game week 7. Maddison came in quite late for Saka in game week 8. So another lesson to be learned here is that Maddison was basically a must-own player as far as the sort of crowd was concerned in the first 7 or 8 game weeks of the season. But, his rise to the top has very much, took place before he brought Maddison in. So further proof that you don't necessarily have to have absolutely everybody that everyone else has got. Maybe getting them, coming late to the party isn't going to leave you as at the back of the grid as you think, as demonstrated by this particular team. Then Colwill left the team in game week 9 to be replaced by Zinchenko. Gordon left in game week 10 and Matoma came in. Game week 11, he sold Botman. Obviously, he's had that injury. Brought in Zuma. So you can tell that he's starting to prime himself with West Ham players ahead of this game against Burnley. Maddison then left the team, of course, in game week 12 with that injury. And Bowen came in, which means that he can captain Bowen in game week 13 if he wants to, which is something we've been discussing a lot. If you have a look at my team selection video earlier on this week, or podcast, depending on where you access the content, I've gone into detail about maybe doing that. And also Joe and Tom, of course, always do their goals imminent, but they've also had a look at a captaincy debate, because we don't often get many of those anymore. Captaincy debates have also looked at Bowen as well. And so the world number 1 has the opportunity to do that, and that's why his team looks as it does at the moment. But as I said, how he's got there with the transfers is a bit different, but in terms of the actual personnel that he's got, there's no reason you can't have a team like this and do as well as him. Now, the key thing here, which you'll have seen, of course, on the title and the thumbnail, is that actually there hasn't been a single chip usage yet. So it means the wild card is still in the pocket, and of course the free hit, the triple captain, and the bench boost, all of them have been left untouched. So no active chips so far. Which means, I mean, I've got to say, I mean, this guy's in a great position. Now, when we looked at the previous world number one, I think he definitely used his wild card, and I'm fairly confident he'd used one of the other three. Off the top of my head, I do apologise, I can't remember which of the other three he'd used. I think it might have been the free hit. It was one of the other three. So that guy is now obviously short a wildcard for the rest of the first wildcard period and short one of those other chips ahead of that chip season. Now the current world leader still has all of those. So wow, I mean, what a position to be in, because I kind of see those as like games in hand. When you look at the Premier League table and perhaps there's a team that's played 2 games fewer than everybody else, you know, you look at their points total and you can start sort of doing a little bit of hypotheticals. Oh yeah, they'd be able to get above this one, get above this one. So that lack of chip usage is, wow, something to keep an eye on. Keep an eye on when he uses these chips, because if he's still number one or in the top 50 when he starts using them, it could be a very, very powerful time for his team. But in terms of what we can learn from that as well, there's always a lot of pressure to use the wild card quite early on, I find, in the fantasy football world, especially when you're obviously tuning into a lot of the content that we put out. I mean, we're as guilty of sort of creating that urgency for the wild card as the next man, because the second that people start using their wild card and start talking about it, naturally we obviously have to start putting wild card in the thumbnail and in the title and things like that. It's par for the course in many ways, but there is definitely a lot to be said for people that can hold off on that feeling and deploy the wildcard much later on. Now, we saw that with Ali last year. He deployed his wildcard quite late. I think it was around sometime after Gameweek 12, which is much later than the sort of the meta kind of feeling is, usually somewhere between Gameweek 4 and 8, usually. And so sometimes we can feel like, if I don't use my wildcard, am I going to be leaving myself short? Well, of course, the world number one is demonstrating that you can hold off on your wildcard, and it doesn't necessarily have to put you in a poor position. Also, just reflections from my own team. I'm up to 38k right now, still haven't used my wildcard ever, so I feel quite good about things. Hopefully, those two anecdotes. Now, one of these guys in that comparison is obviously considerably more skillful than the other one, and that is, of course, the world number one, not myself. But, there's a lot of people out there who are still doing well, leaving their wildcard late. And you might be sat there going, David, I've already used my wildcard. That's not very, very useful. But maybe it's something to think about for next season when the wildcard pressure kicks in. Think about the fact that you can actually go further than you might think without using the wild card, even in the world when there's lots of injuries. Because, I've had injuries this season. I've still got 2 injured players on my bench. Just been trying to maximise my 11. And you can see from the world number one as well, he's still got 2 flagged players on the bench. Doesn't seem too fussed by it. Now, he may well have played his wild card before the Game Week 13 deadline, and we're just sat here sort of wasting time talking about it. But to get this far without the wild card and be doing well, without wanting to sound like a broken record, I think that we should really pay attention to that and consider how that might impact our chip usage in the coming seasons. Now, it'll be interesting to see, of course, where people go with the chips when we've got blank game week coming up for the Club World Cups. Not often we get that. We've got to have an English team winning the Champions League to do that. It doesn't happen all the time. Happens once in a blue moon, you might say. Pun completely intended there. And so it'll be interesting to see what the world number one does with their chips then, because the free hit may be powerful in that game week, or he might use the blank game week as a dead end point for the wildcard in Game Week 19. That's something I've been thinking about as well. So it's worth keeping an eye on that. Now, hopefully you found this video useful. It's a little bit different to what we normally do, but there's always lessons to be learned from the high-ranking managers. So if you've liked this video, then please, like this video on YouTube. Hit the like button for us. It's a great way to support the channel. And subscribe as well, and hit that bell notification. When we are in the depths of the international break, the bell notification is going to be your savior, because it means that when the schedule is a bit different and all of the videos aren't quite geared around when the games are, then you won't miss a thing. So do hit that button, and it will help you with your fantasy Premier League learnings. Now, with that in mind, I shall leave you fine folks to enjoy the rest of your international break, and I shall see you next time. Goodbye.